There it is, the first 2 hours of the White House lawyers' rebuttal to what we heard from the Democrats. The House managers, they spent about 21 hours or so, maybe 22, close to 22 hours, making their case why the president of the United States should not only be impeached, but should be convicted and removed from office. We heard a very, very different side of the story from these four White House lawyers today. Pat Cipollone, Jay Sekulow, Mike Purpura, and Pat Philbin. Some more powerful than the others in trying to raise questions about the credibility of the House managers, especially the lead House manager, Adam Schiff.
Well, one thing I was surprised about is we didn't hear about the Bidens very much. We didn't hear all the Hunter Biden that we thought, or at least I thought we might hear today. Instead, we got this kind of, legal argument here, a Trump's the victim argument there, a little bit scattershot, but it wasn't as affirmative and offensive of an argument as I expected. We may see more of that on Monday, but I thought we'd get more of that. It's a little bit of a surprise.
Ross?
Yeah, I think the notion was go into the weekend and sort of hit the key points of the House manager's case. Normally the person who defines the issue wins. So I was a little bit surprised that the president's team sort of didn't kind of make their own case, hit their own points. But I think the reason for that is they knew we were going into a weekend. They know about the Sunday talk shows. They're trying to hit the House manager's point. And then the appeal to the kind of general public that this is about elections. This is about, kind of disrupting the results of the 2016 election and potentially disrupting the 2020 election. That's sort of the appeal to the general public.
It seemed to me, though, Sunday talk shows seem to be important to President Trump. He certainly seems to watch them and like to have his people on them. I would have thought going into those shows, they would have made more of an argument on whether it's the Bidens or whatever argument they want to push.
I love me some Jake Tapper, but are the Sunday shows really that important?
He watches.
To the world.
No, I'm not saying to the world. I'm saying to President Trump.
It's sort of mystifying to me that he's so concerned about them. I just think, the Republicans are winning here. The president is winning here. And as long as they don't, completely fall on their faces, which they're all competent lawyers, they're not going to do that. I think that's fine for them.
But look who was selected to speak today. The fact that the president of the United States picked people like Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr and others who are somewhat flamboyant. Ken Starr's not so flamboyant, but controversial because he's known for the prior big case that he presided over. Those guys weren't up on the Senate floor today. And it may be that this is in coordination with the president. It may be that we'll hear reports later today that the president was really angry about this because he cares about the Sunday shows and he wanted more pep and he wanted more fire and brimstone and he wanted more Biden. We don't know. We see that all the time. He is watching, sometimes on mute, sometimes he's watching with sound. And he'll have a reaction to this, and then we'll see. And maybe we'll see all those things that Jennifer is right to say were surprisingly missing today on Monday.
They also seemed, off the top, they really tried to put the transcript kind of at the center, which is
and they did make one good point about that, I thought, which was, the president did talk about burden sharing in that phone call, and the House managers didn't focus on that or even mention it. And fair is fair. I think
which is something he has talked about in other places.
He has talked about before, and that was, I thought, a very legitimate, good point made by the defense. Whether that's enough to overcome what else is in the transcript is a separate question, but I believe that was Cipollone who raised that. I'm trying to remember which lawyer it was. But, this is what good lawyers do. You point to evidence that favors your case. Whether it is the dispositive piece of evidence is, of course, a different question, but good for them.
They can't help themselves from making stupid mistakes. They're talking about the transcript, and Purpura actually says it's the real transcript. It's the actual transcript. It's not a transcript, and it says so right on the front page of it. Why are they mischaracterizing things when they don't
President Trump said about the transcript.
But that's the point. These are his lawyers are supposed to be more careful. Why are you going to misrepresent what it is when all you have to say is, we have the readout from the call, let's look at that and see what it says? It just seems like a mistake to me.
Talks in terms of transcript. I think they wanted to make sure everybody knew what they were talking about. It was the readout, which everybody refers to as a transcript.
But they did try to,
in contrast to the whistleblowers.
They did try to point out, early on, what they were referring to were sort of the Democratic facts, the Democrats' facts, that the things that they pre-approved in the underground bunker, which is, again, just not a completely accurate way to describe it.
It's not a bunker. By the way, Michael Propera, who I have great respect for, and former colleague of mine, and Jennifer's, served in the military. He knows it's not a bunker, and a SCIF doesn't have windows. Doesn't matter if it's in the basement or in the penthouse, if there's a view. You know, that's sort of parroting some of the words that Trump and his political allies like to put forward. They're dog whistles, I guess, to folks. They don't get to the facts. Sometimes they did do a good job. So, for example, repeatedly, and you see this at regular trials too, they said, you know what you didn't hear from the prosecution? You know what you didn't hear from the House manager? You didn't hear this fact or that fact. I think they overdid that. They did that too much. And sometimes it behooves the people presenting the case in anticipation, like Adam Schiff did with some things yesterday, but not everything, to say, you know what, these are some facts that are not good for us. Let me explain to you why they actually don't hurt our case. And so they did come back at them and said,
right,
you know, these things didn't happen.
Is that one of the reasons you think that the Democrats focused on the Bidens to the extent that they did? That it takes away from the prosecution, from the defense saying, well, you know what they didn't tell you about? They didn't want to talk about the Bidens. Here's why. Yeah,
I mean, that's what you do. You know, you pull the sting. In any direct examination of a witness who's got a problem, you want to make sure that you, as the prosecutor, bring that out first so it pulls the sting, so when the other side raises it, it's not so harmful. You know, there are 95 things that they could have done that way. They probably did it with respect to a majority of them, but they picked out all the things that they didn't.
But you made a good point, Jennifer. I mean, that we didn't hear. I didn't even know if Biden was mentioned today. If he was, it was very briefly. And I said I thought, you know, today was the trial of Joe Biden. Didn't happen, and I expect that will be saved for the better ratings of a weekday, because there is no way the Trump lawyers are going to try this case without going after Joe Biden in a very big way.
What we did expect, which came to pass, was Giuliani wasn't even mentioned, as far as I
didn't hear his name at all.
Yeah. And we won't.
Which is not a surprise. You know, what the president's lawyers did was they, you know, stuck very closely to, you know, what the president said and people who talked to the president, and stayed away from all of the Giuliani stuff. One of the other things I think was notable was who did the arguments today. It was mostly the president's official lawyers. These are White House lawyers. These are government employees, as opposed to the president's personal lawyers. Jay Sekulow was the only personal lawyer who spoke today. That to me was pretty striking.
White House and white people. I mean, you know, this is a lesson in the diversity of the two parties. I mean, you look at the House managers, it was almost evenly divided between men and women. You had 2 African Americans, you had a Hispanic. I mean, you know, look, it was all white men today. There are two white women on allegedly on the team. We'll see if they're allowed to argue. But I mean, I think, you know, in a visual medium, when you have one side that has a very diverse team, and the other side that's all white men, that says something in and of itself.
The focus on the transcript is interesting, that they sort of did their interpretation of the transcript, but it's also not the whole story. I mean, it is, again, a one of the larger, kind of writ large talking points of the Trump administration, which is, you know, they're trying to impeach him over a phone call. It's something that has been going on a lot longer than that phone call.
You know, it's not, and it's an interesting thing about the way that this is proceeding, because in a trial, the prosecutors would get a rebuttal. So one of the first things they would do is stand up and say, you know, they missed all of this stuff. You know, I want to remind you about all of this evidence that the defense lawyers didn't tell you about. Well, they're not going to get a chance to do that here. There will be questions, and you have to hope that the senators will put the lawyers to the task and ask them questions about things that they missed. But no one's going to be able to stand up and say they wanted to talk only about the transcript. They didn't want to talk about all of the other testimony about what was going on at the time that shows that this was a quid pro quo.
When it gets to the questions, or how is that done? Is that written? Is it?
Yeah. So the way it works is the senators write the questions or have their staff write them for them, submit them, and then the Chief Justice actually puts the questions to the lawyers, and the lawyers answer. You know, one of the things that, you know, I'm looking to see is which lawyers are actually present for the Q&A. You know, is Alan Dershowitz going to be there for the questions and answers? Is Ken Starr going to be there for the questions and answers? My hunch is probably not. But that segment will be quite something to see.
But how does follow-up work? I mean, as any good lawyer knows, it's not the initial question that elicits the proper response. It's the second, third, or fourth question. And I don't know that Justice Roberts is going to be following up. He won't be, correct?
No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It'll be up to the senators to submit additional questions.
So when there was an utterly non-responsive answer that goes beyond the scope or is a distraction, that's it, and we're done.
That's it.
I'm trying to remember. I was there. I don't think Rehnquist read the questions. Did he? I apologize for not knowing that.
I think he did. I can't remember.
I'm told he did.
He did read the questions,
I think he
really?
did, yeah.
Okay.